Hello guys, today I am going to talk about the Sicilian defense, accelerated dragon variation. Intuically develops the bishop to g7 to control the center and prepare attacks. It is a fast and flexible opening, and many top players use it to make the game sharp and exciting. I really love it when my opponent plays the move bishop to c4. I call it the I don't know how to play this variation move because, in essence, my opponent is trying to play the Italian game, even though we did not actually play pawn to e5. We are playing the Sicilian defense, but because they are unfamiliar with it, they play what they know, which is unsuitable in this position. That is why I enjoy seeing this line from my opponent's side. Now we are going to play pawn to g6 because we are going to enter the accelerated dragon variation. This variation is very aggressive, has many traps, but is also solid. I played it up to the level of FIDE Master with great results. After that, when I started facing stronger opponents such as Masters and Grandmasters, its effectiveness diminished somewhat, but up to that point, it worked tremendously. Well, now in this position, finally some of my opponents will try the fried liver attack again, with knight to g5, attempting to basically checkmate with bishop takes 7 pounds, but it does not work. Since your pawn is still on e7, you can simply play pawn to e6 and block the bishop. That is why I said the bishop on c4 is a bad piece here, and they should not place it there, but they still do. Now, another funny thing happens. Sometimes they continue with queen to f3, still trying to push this scholar's checkmate idea. In this case, they actually blunder. The knight on g5 is undefended, so you can just capture it and win a piece. But the mistakes do not stop here. The second and third most popular moves by white in this position are pushing the pawn to d3 or pawn to d4. They notice that it creates a discovered attack on your queen and try to do something in the middle of the board. However, they overlook the fact that this is a two-way threat. Not only does the bishop attack the queen, but the queen also attacks the bishop. So after queen takes c1, you simply keep capturing everything offered, and you win the game. Now what if your opponent does not blunder everything and just plays standard development moves? Suppose they avoid pushing pawn to d4 because it is more complicated, so they try to develop their pieces normally. In this case, we bring our bishop to g7 on the long diagonal, which is one of the key pieces in the Sicilian Dragon variation. After they castle, you usually develop your knight to f6. However, in this line, pawn d4, I recommend playing pawn to e6 and then developing your knight to e7. Why? First, it keeps the long diagonal open for your bishop. Second, the pawn on e6 completely blocks the opponent's bishop on c4, which is currently inactive. Third, pawn d3, and you are ready to play pawn to d5 on the next move, gaining tempo and attacking the center while targeting the exposed bishop. Is also a small trap. If your opponent plays bishop to a3 thinking it attacks your pawn, you do not need to defend it. Just play pawn to d5, counterattacking the bishop. On the next move, after they move the bishop, you play pawn to d4 with a double attack, win a minor piece, and gain a winning position. Even if your opponent does not blunder, you still get a strong position and can safely castle. Third, your opponent plays standard moves. Now, let's dive into the main line, and at the end I will quickly show a few sidelines. The main line begins when white plays pawn to d4, which is the most ambitious move. In this case, you trade, but you do not capture on d4 because that is a mistake. Capturing releases the tension and helps your opponent become more active, for example by bringing their queen to a better square. Instead, you focus on developing your bishop, as we want in the dragon variation. After that, they play a move, and you continue with bishop to g7, creating pressure against their knight on d4. Many opponents will incorrectly trade on c6. When they do, you recapture towards the center. You should recapture with the b-pawn, not the d-pawn, because it keeps your queen safe, solidifies your center, controls important squares, and may allow you to play pawn to d5 later. Another advantage is the semi-open file for your rook, which together with your bishop can create strong pressure on your opponent's position. Life is good at this stage. Now, if white plays bishop to c4, there is one thing you must be careful about. Whenever you develop your knight to f6, you have to watch out for pawn to e5. If you just develop the knight after pawn to e5, there is no good square for the knight, because all the squares are controlled by white. You might have to retreat your knight back to g8, which wastes time. The easiest way to prevent this is to play pawn to d6 first. This controls the e5 square after you play knight to f6, and d6 also opens the diagonal for your bishop. If white plays actively with queen to f3, trying a scholar's checkmate, you still play knight to f6. After that, whether they castle or play bishop to g5, you castle as well. Suppose they try to play aggressively and castle queenside. This is already a blunder. You can play bishop to g4, and thanks to this, you win material. In general, although white thinks they are playing actively, it backfires badly. Castling queenside can be very dangerous when there is an open file against it. You can bring your queen to a 5, placing it on an active square and creating strong pressure. Then you can play rook to b8, putting pressure along the b file. Your bishop may look inactive, but it actually supports your attack along the long diagonal. You are already building strong pressure, and for white it will take many moves to create any counterplay on the king side. Even with equal material, this position is better for black, and with a material advantage, it is completely winning. Back to the main line of the Sicilian defense, we are attacking the knight on d4. If white captures on c6, it actually benefits you by improving your center and opening the b file for your rook. It is better for white not to capture, but to play bishop to e3, defending the knight. After that, you play knight to f6 and castle, which is standard development. There is one tricky idea in the accelerated dragon, popularized by Bobby Fischer, called the sacrifice checkmate pattern against the dragon variation. There is a plan in the accelerated dragon where white castles queenside. Typically, white plays queen to d2 first, and then advances pawn to f3, pawn to h4, and pawn to h5 to open the h-file and attempt a checkmate against the black king. This plan is very effective against the classical dragon variation. However, the accelerated dragon is different. In the classical dragon, black usually has a pawn on d6, which helps control the center and limits white's attacking options. In the accelerated dragon, the pawn is still on d7, which allows black to create strong counterattacks. There are two main ideas for black here. One is to advance the knight to g4, and the other is to strike in the center with pawn to d5. When you play either of these moves, your opponent struggles to find a good plan, and black gains the initiative. This is why the accelerated dragon is so powerful. Many opponents, unfamiliar with this line, try to follow their usual plans, which often backfires quickly. For example, after black plays knight to g4, white cannot easily play pawn to f3 to stop the attack. Now the knight on g4 pressures the bishop on e3, and white cannot easily trade it or move it without losing the knight on d4. Many opponents then try to save their bishop by trading it on c6. This is actually good for black, because it strengthens the center and opens the b file for the rook. After this, black can continue to trade off the bishop on e3 if needed, and consolidate a strong position. They cannot play bishop to h6 to exchange your bishop, making your bishop extremely powerful. Generally, the bishop on g7 becomes very strong. If white plays bishop to d4, do not automatically capture it, because attacking and creating threats is better than unnecessary trades. A powerful and strategic plan here is to play bishop to h6, taking full advantage of the pinned f4 pawn. This move immediately puts pressure on white's position and opens up multiple tactical possibilities. If white attempts to defend with pawn to f4, trying to shield the queen, you can strike back strongly with pawn to a5, directly attacking the bishop and increasing the tension in the center. Once the position opens, bishop takes f4 follows, winning the queen instantly since the f4 pawn is pinned and unable to capture. Even if white tries a defensive move like bishop to e3, you can calmly exchange and then play bishop takes f4, winning the queen. This shows how the bishop on g7 becomes very powerful and how careful attacking moves can give black a winning position.